and we are recording. So I forgot to do that one last time. Right, share screen. Cool. So where are my slides? Here are my slides. So as I said, as a lesson earlier was all about sleep, we're going to be talking about sleeping for fat loss. So it's a really, really common thing in the Western world to almost idolize a lack of sleep. Obviously, there are some things which are outside of our control. So for example, I've got a 2.5-year-old. She still does not sleep through the night. So sometimes my sleep is quite broken because she'll get into bed with us and she'll be kicking me in the back, which obviously is outside of my control. Other people, it's almost, what's the word? Idolized, where people are part of the 5 a.m. club. So you see The Rock on his Instagram still at like midnight, 1 o'clock, and then he's up at 5 a.m. to do his 5 a.m. workout, surviving on like 0 sleep. But more and more studies are now starting to show that has really, really detrimental effects to your brain in the long run. I think a really famous one was Margaret Thatcher, famously only surviving like 4 hours sleep a night, but then she ended up with dementia. So it's one of those things, is it worth it in the short term for the benefit you get to productivity to then have years and years cut off your life? But that's a different subject. So what we're going to run through today, as I said, is sleeping for fat loss. So sleep hygiene, which is basically the habits that are happening around your sleeping cycle. So what are you doing in that hour before bed? Sleep disorders, chronic lack of sleep and the effects that it has, setting up a structure, something called a Lumi lamp, which is a product that I recommend to a lot of my clients. And then we, again, will just go through those solutions at the end. So sleep hygiene, as I said before, is your pre-bed routine. So if in that hour, right before you go into bed, you're looking at your mobile phone, you're on social media, you're doing lots of things that are going to be stimulating the thinking part of your brain, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of people struggle to switch off at night. Even if it doesn't stimulate that part of your brain and you are still able to get to sleep, what you will find is you are unable to get to what's called REM sleep or deep sleep as quickly. If you have one of these monitors that tracks your sleep, you'll find you're in light sleep for kind of a lot longer. So the science behind that is basically up until 200-300 years ago, with the invention of the electric light bulb, the only blue light our eyes would be exposed to was from sunlight. So if you look at candles and fires, their light it's more in the yellowy reddy spectrum rather than the blue spectrum. So obviously when you shine a light through a prism, it breaks it up into all its different constituent parts, and yeah, that's getting really, really sciencey. Basically, human beings were only exposed to blue light during the day, which then meant our circadian rhythms, so our natural rhythms for sleep and wake, tied into blue light exposure. It's why waking up in the winter feels so much harder, because you're actually having to get up when it's dark and your brain and your body doesn't want to get up because, again, it hasn't been exposed to that blue light. Doing work in the bedroom. So a lot of people, as I said, they might be answering emails, they might be on the laptop doing a project right up until kind of they're going to bed. Do you have a set wake up time, or do you change what time you wake up depending on the day of the week? Is a lot of people in the Western world sleep in on a weekend. However, if you sleep in on a weekend by say 2 to 3 hours, have you noticed how the rest of your day then seems to kind of get knocked out of whack? So if your body's used to getting up at 6 a.m. every day and suddenly you've slept in till 8:30, where would your first meal normally be? If you woke up at 6 o'clock, you'll probably be having breakfast about 6:30. You'll be probably ready for meal number 2 by 10 o'clock. If you're not waking up till 8 o'clock, you might not even feel hungry when you first wake up. You might not eat till 9 because it's the weekend. And it'll have a cascade effect on all those other things that are setting your circadian rhythms in place. And you're essentially giving yourself jet lag, on a weekly basis. So you're consistently knocking your body clock out of sync. And then caffeine and alcohol consumption. So I think most people are aware that when you drink caffeine, it's a stimulant, just like we spoke about in the stress webinar yesterday. Stimulants stimulate your fight or flight system, and all those kind of like cortisol, adrenaline, all those things are kind of raised. Now, caffeine has a half-life of anywhere from 6 to 12 hours. It all depends on you as a person. So some people will break down caffeine, as I said, within 6 hours, and some in 12. So the active life of caffeine is about half an hour to an hour. That's when you feel that buzz and that high. However, it can still be sitting in your system and having physiological effects for anywhere from 6 to 12. So if you're particularly sensitive to caffeine, you probably don't want to be drinking any caffeine after lunchtime. As a rule of thumb, it just means it's not going to interfere with your rhythms in the nighttime. And then alcohol consumption, again, a lot of people will drink alcohol at night to help themselves get to sleep because they're stressed or whatever their reasons are. They feel better when they have a glass of wine or they have a beer or they have a whiskey or whatever before bed, because it helps them go to sleep. The problem is, because it's a depressant, yes, initially it will help you get into sleep. However, when your liver's broken that alcohol down and you come back out, you'll find if you watch the entire night as a whole, again, you spend less time in that deep restorative sleep, which is what we're kind of trying to get to. So sleep disorders. So these are on like one end of the spectrum. So there are over 90 recognized sleep disorders. So when I was researching this, I didn't realize there was that many, but they can be broken down into two main categories marked by their symptoms. You've got excessive daytime sleepiness and difficulty initiating or maintaining sleep. Those are basically the two main categories. And then abnormal movements, behaviors, or sensations occurring during sleep. So that is that's like a subcategory. So excessive daytime sleepiness is things like narcolepsy, or if you've got sleep apnea, you can find that you like fall asleep in random places. Difficulty initiating or maintaining sleep, that's things like what's the word for it? Insomnia, sleep paralysis, all those kind of things. And then abnormal movements, behaviors, or sensations. Sorry, not sleep paralysis is abnormal sensations occurring during sleep, and abnormal movements is things like sleepwalking. So if you're setting up a structure, so if any of you guys have kids, you'll know this, like you've got to have a pre-bed routine with a child, or else they don't go to sleep. So when you set things in stone, so for a baby, it might be, right, we play until, say, 5:30. We then take you up for a warm bath, which is going to be half an hour till 6. We're then going to read you a story from 6 till 1:15. And then we're trying to get you to sleep from 1:15 to anywhere up to about 7 o'clock, when they will eventually fall asleep. But it's a very, very set routine and same each night. And you'll notice anytime there's a disruption to that routine, it's much, much harder to get that child to go to sleep. Same thing for adults. Like if you can have a set routine in place, you'll find it much, much easier to kind of drift off to sleep. It's a concept called anchoring. So when you do certain behaviors, when you hear certain sounds, when you do things in a particular order, it will set off a cascade of things happening within your brain that say to your brain, right, this is what to expect next. So we can create that. It's basically a habit formation. So if you're setting up a structure, what I would advise is 1 hour pre-bed, put the electronic devices away. If you have to utilize them, let me just go and see. I've got mine in here. I do not, because they are next to my bed. So you can buy what's called blue light glasses. So they're just, if you don't need magnification, they're just perspex lenses that have got a slightly yellow tinge to them. What I will do is I will post a photo up on the group of my blue light glasses. I think I got them from Amazon for about £10. They're not expensive. So the little yellow film that's on the inside of them will block the blue light and allow your natural melatonin production to happen. So what blue light does is it stimulates serotonin and inhibits melatonin. Serotonin is a wake-up hormone. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. So as I said, that's how blue light disrupts those. 30 minutes pre-bed, creative stimulation. So what this means is reading a book or, I don't know, writing in your journal if you've got one. So I think we did that for stress relief yesterday, was to write kind of like the 3 things like to be grateful for. So it's, as I said, getting away from the electronic devices and going to like good old-fashioned pen and paper, read a book, read a trashy magazine, just something that's not going to be stimulating like the thinking parts of your brain, where you're going to have to problem solve and when you're going to have to actually utilize the frontal cortex, just because, again, that's going to wake you up. Whereas when you sleep, it's your imagination you want to be stimulating. So bedtime, fully dark room, preferably chilled, so that it's below what kind of a normal temperature would be. You could use music or a meditation or a pink noise. So pink noise is very similar to white noise, it's just not as harsh. So we've got an Alexa hub in the bedroom, and I pay, I think it's about 90p a month for what's called a pink noise skill. It just means that it'll then play all night. If you don't pay for the skill, it'll go off after about an hour. Again, that helps Willow when she's in bed with us. We've also listened to sleep meditations. If you go on to YouTube, I think it's not Jason Grossman, it's Jason Goodman, Jonathan Goodman. Wait a sec, I will look it up now. Jason Stevenson. So my missus likes his voice, so that's why we picked Jason Stevenson. So if you just type in sleep meditation onto YouTube or whatever, there's hundreds of them out there. And what you can do is you can download those onto your phone or onto a memory stick or whatever and have it playing so it's offline, so that you don't necessarily have to have your phone in your room. Another thing would be to try and, if you go put your phone on charge downstairs so you're not listening to your phone. So we listen on the Amazon Alexa. If you need an alarm clock, like go to a pound shop and you can buy an alarm clock very, very quickly, or you can use the next product that I'm going to be saying, which is the Lumi lamp, and I'll explain that in a second. So essentially you want electronic devices, anything that's going to be emitting light wants to ideally come out of the room if you can. So waking up. If you wake up to a traditional alarm, what will happen is 9 times out of 10, you'll be in deep sleep. And because it's a sudden sharp shock to get you up, because it's a sound that's going off, you will wake up in fight or flight. If you're in the wild and you were woken up suddenly, like it would be you'd be in danger. That's why you've been woken up suddenly. It's a sudden noise, it's a sudden thing that makes you go, and that's why you kind of wake up with a jolt, and it's just a bit like, it sets you up to be basically stressed for the rest of your day because you've started the day like that. There's a product called a Lumi lamp which simulates a sunrise. So what happens is you set your alarm for the time you would normally need to wake up. What I'd say is turn the face of the lamp. So it's basically, it's an alarm clock that has a light on the front of it. But turn the face of the light so that it's facing the wall, like away from you, because what happens is it starts off quite, well, it's a light essentially, but it starts off low and increases in brightness slowly until you get to the time you would want to wake up, and then an alarm does sound kind of at that time. And for me, I messed around with the timing of it, because what I'd find is I'd often wake up before the alarm has kind of like kicked off. But again, because it simulates a sunrise, it's a more gentle way to wake up, unless the light flashes in your face and then you will wake up very suddenly, and that kind of defeats the object. So that's what I'm saying, like turn the lamp around and have it illuminate the room that's kind of like away from you. And then you'll wake up more gently. As I said, it's more like a gentle sunrise rather than an alarm going off in your head. Your sympathetic and parasympathetic stimulation. So the Lumi lamp will stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. You'll wake up in a more relaxed state and set yourself up better for the day. The sympathetic nervous system stimulated by a traditional alarm. So I'll be talking about these more next session. Okay. So what's happened is this presentation used to be before the stress presentation, but I've put them the other way around now. So in summary, you should be aiming for 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep. So what I would tend to do is work backwards. When do you need to wake up from? So when do you need to actually be going to sleep to get your average of 8 hours? Electronic devices before bed disrupt this pattern. So if you do need to use electronic devices before bed, look into blue light blocking glasses, and you can turn blue light modes on most electronic devices nowadays. Routine is your friend. So if you find that you struggle sleeping, try putting a sleep routine in place and seeing if that kind of has an effect, because a lot of the time it's that as adults, because we can just make decisions, we don't think about actually how much we disrupt our own habits by just not having routines. Now, it doesn't matter if like some nights it kind of goes out of sync, and you won't suddenly like get insomnia because you're not following your routine to the letter. It will just help to give you a structure. The easiest way to think about it is if you set off from here, so if you set off from your house and you wanted to go to London, you would pull out your phone, bring up the sat nav and follow a map. Now, as you're following that map, there may be roadworks along the way, which are going to cause a disruption to your route, but you wouldn't not set off and you wouldn't not use a map just in case there's roadworks along the way that are going to cause you to have to change direction. So just by having a plan doesn't mean that it's going to make your life fall apart if you have to kind of come off that plan. So if you want to lose fat, lack of sleep makes this considerably harder. So there's lots and lots of studies that have been done where they've done sleep deprived tests and run a fat loss protocol at the same time. I can't remember the exact study, but the highlights of it are, I think they had 20 participants, 10 were sleep deprived. I think they were only sleep deprived by about an hour a night, and the others were just left to sleep normally. They ran the same training regimen, the same protocol in terms of diet. They both lost a similar amount of weight. However, the people that were sleep deprived lost equal parts fat and muscle, which means in the long term, their metabolic rate will be slowed down. So they lost quite a lot of muscle doing it as well. Whereas the people who weren't sleep deprived lost a higher percentage of fat rather than muscle. So they would be able to sustain that fat loss for a longer period of time. Perfect. So Sam, have we got any questions about any of that? Anything you want to clear up?
No, I don't. Thank you. Interesting.
No? Awesome. No worries. So yeah, I will end this record.